Hey, thanks for tuning in to OK Boomer. I'm Jimmy Amatufis, co-host of this fine podcast. Today we finish our conversation with Brian Schoo, the chairman of the board of the International Surf Therapy Organization. Hence the music. Brian's an amazing guy. He's a red-haired Midwesterner who's checked out of a lucrative position with the Nestle Corporation to steer surf therapy into a mainstream service for dealing with a host of struggles that include PTSD, autism, chronic pain, addiction. Stick around. Catch a wave.
Okay, Boomer. Okay, Boomer. Okay, Boomer. Okay, Boomer. Okay, Boomer.
Thank you, Jimmy, for that intro. You sounded almost as energetic as President Biden in his State of the Union address.
It's an intriguing topic, Boomer.
It sure is. In part one, we learned how Brian impressively navigated the corporate world and then jumped ship to take on this new role as captain of a nascent nonprofit. In part two, we'll look closely at the nuts and bolts of surf therapy. It's not just grabbing a board and running into the water. It's a deliberate, analytical, fascinating approach to changing people's lives. We'll conclude with Brian sharing an incredible success story of a surf therapy client who, through his therapy on the waves, freed himself from a predicted dismal and limited future. Here's part two. There's something about nature, I think, with all elements of nature that we seem to that the connection with those things that are bigger than us, obviously an ocean. Anytime I see even Lake Michigan, I see that endless water to the horizon. It's like, wow, I'm really small compared to that. Or if I'm riding a horse, I'm always impressed with the immensity and the power of this beast underneath me that I need to work with and be in touch with and sense what it's doing so that the two of us can work together, just like you're working together with a surfboard and the water. There's something about that connection with nature that seems to be so basic to human growth and human being comfortable with yourself and your spirit and making a larger connection outside of yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. We absolutely believe that that's a huge element, and that's excited to start to work on the data to prove that out. But there's no doubt for anybody who's witnessed it, there is something going on with nature in terms of helping us regulate ourselves. Absolutely. I think individuals can have different ways of doing that. Some are more forest people, some are mountain people, some are beach people. And I think it's important for all of us to look at what is our own personal recipe. For some, it may be surf therapy. For others, it might be hiking. But I do think you're onto something, that the nature outdoors does something for us that we've lost in modern society to some extent.
Instead of connecting...
And it's really clear that being in nature does help. In fact, the grief surf therapy ones, right? When you think of the tides and the waves rolling in and rolling out, it's a great analogy to be, you let the emotions roll through you and then roll back out. And so even utilizing nature as an analogy for you to visualize how you can process through some grief or other emotions, find very helpful.
There's something different between connecting with a screen in front of you or a phone that you're holding in your hand versus, and that seems very, I don't want to sound self-centered is the right word, but it's very centered there versus trying to connect with the universe, with what Mother Nature is a part of. It's a very different connection.
Without question. I can only speak for myself on this, but what I notice is the more I'm with screen time, the more my brain races, the more I can't control my thoughts or to sit down and really be able to critically think for 1-2 hours at a time, which is something that I find very valuable to be able to do. In fact, I can't get there without nature. Yeah. And so I notice screens, it does something to my brain, at least, to where if I don't give myself breaks with nature, I eventually can't think. It will just be too chaotic in my head. And so I doubt I'm the only one that experiences that. But I think there is something very valid about if you have so much screen time and you're struggling, consider just going for a walk without your phone and seeing what happens.
Well, I know that when I go out fishing on a river, it doesn't really matter whether I catch any fish, but sitting in the boat, just letting the waves rock me, checking out what's going on the shore, the birds flying over, the occasional deer I might see swimming across, that all just lets my brain slow down. It gives me a chance to just breathe instead of being stimulated electronically all the time. Yeah, a big deal out being in nature and absorbing it.
Well said, Jimmy. You seem like a smart man.
Wow. Did you hear that, Boomer? I heard it, Jimmy, and don't ask for a raise, all right? So tell us some more about surf therapy. What are the requirements to qualify for somebody? How old? What are the age of your clients? We've talked some about the wide range of afflictions, and you could also talk about how you've opened it up to people who might have some physical difficulties also.
Yeah, so when we look at in 2023, the reach and impact of the International Surf Therapy Organization, which again is comprised of 133 individual nonprofits of their own. So they're contributors towards us, and basically what they need to have is they need to demonstrate that they have a framework in place, that it's safe, and that they are, in compliance with their regulatory body. We're a global organization, so this is not a U.S. rules for every other country. This is wherever you're located, are you qualified and regulated and in good compliance with that regulatory body? At the end of the day, our age groups of participants, there was about just under 20,000 participants in 2023. Across those 133 organizations, and they range in age from youth, 7, 8 years old or younger, all the way up to quite a bit older in age. And when we look at the different groups, there's children, there's veterans and active duty, first responders, women, adults with trauma, PTSD, depression, anxiety, etc., chronic pain, and addiction. So there's different surf therapies and groups of surf therapies dedicated to different population groups. But when we define surf therapy, and this will be an evolving definition as we get more and more data, but it's really the use of surfing as a vehicle for delivering intentional, inclusive, population-specific, and evidence-based therapeutic structures to promote psychological, physical, and psychosocial well-being. So what that's really saying is it's a method, it's a way to drive psychological, social, and physical improvement in one's life. That can manifest itself through self-confidence, believing they can do something that's difficult, through community. But oftentimes it's just getting in the water and like you were mentioning before, being in nature and being present and slowly building from there.
That's awesome. It's such a wide array of concepts that you're dealing with. And I know that you're working hard to make it, to show eventually that this is a worthwhile therapy. It's a legitimate therapy. It's not out there on the fringe end where you're just experimenting, but you're going at it in a very clinical, analytical way so that these organizations can grow, they can become viable, that people see them as a legitimate way to improve all these various situations, the depression, the PTSD, the chronic pain and whatnot. I really appreciate how you're going at it in such a structured fashion, which of course, which is something you had to do with Nestle.
Yeah, it's really important that we do that as an organization, and we believe that because there's stigma out there still. Unfortunately, the version of surfing that most people understand if they've never surfed is the Hollywood version. It's a bunch of people that are just not serious about life and out there
beach bums,
joking around.
Surf's up, dude. Totally tubular.
Beach bums. But the reality here is there's serious researchers, serious academics, and some incredible thought leaders around the world that are driving this forward. And we need to really do the right things with the data and prove this out, because we will have a challenge on perception. When people hear surf therapy, their initial response is just going out and having fun surfing, and that's therapy in itself. And it's not. It's a lot more than that. It's more than just surfing. Surfing's a vehicle for it, but what it does is it opens up the conversations, it opens up the communication, and allows us to relate to each other in a different way. And so we really have to prove that out in order to be taken seriously. That said, I like that challenge. I look at my life. I look at whether it was wrestling, soccer, pole vaulting, not necessarily always the most popular sports or the ones where all the glory is.
Mm-hmm.
I like that grind. I like to be able to build something and to prove something that people on its face dismiss. And I find value in that type of challenge.
Well, good luck with that. I think you're trying to drive this to the point of legitimacy, that insurance companies might eventually recognize that, yeah, this is legitimate things, and these can help our the people that we're insuring, and we want to be able to offset the cost of any such therapy.
That would be definitely an ideal outcome down the road, and I do hope we're able to get there. Where I'd like to see us get to, whether the regulatory bodies, insurance agencies, or others ever come along, is that we, through data, can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's effective. We can show how long it's effective for, and so how long it lasts. So you can start to think of it as a dosage. And then that starts to walk us into being able to have that discussion as, can it be a prescribable intervention in the future? I think it can. I think we should believe that it can, and there will be many, many challenges in our way to get there. But to me, that's why you do these things, is to go after those challenges. And what better way to do that than pull together and work with a bunch of thought leaders around the world that have that same shared passion. And I think when you get to have the opportunity to work with brilliant people that care deeply and are willing to put effort in to overcome the challenges, the barriers that stand in our way are very real, but I believe we'll overcome them because of that human spirit.
Would you run for Congress? Because I'd like to hear a congressman say that we've got these challenges, but we're going to have thoughtful people pull together and welcome these challenges and find a way through it. We're going to have brilliant minds get together. Let's not talk about dysfunctional Congress, but those challenges are really, you're going to have to talk to a medical organization. You're going to have to talk with leading doctors and leading mental health practitioners to help them, or to have them help you show the viability of this therapy.
Absolutely. And one of the ways we're doing that is ISTO actually helped fund, and he's now currently a board member on the board. His name is Jamie Marshall, Dr. Jamie Marshall, and he's the first doctorate in surf therapy.
Excellent.
And what he's been instrumental in many things, but one of the things he's been instrumental in is helping define the logic model and helping the individual contributing programs define their own logic models. So in the logic model, simply put, is if you want to have a desired outcome for an individual or a group of individuals, what are the steps you need to take to get there? So, for example, if a goal of a participant is to develop, to help with social behavior and to build connection with other humans, if they're, say, somebody with autism, that's going to be a challenge. Right? Eye contact, other things are different realities that will come in the way of that. So a logic model will start to attack, how do you have social conversations? How can you make eye contact, or start to work on certain things so that over time you'll eventually get to that point to where you can walk into the outcome you were hoping for. And so those logic models help build the structure of the programs and will also then help us research what's working, what's not. But what's probably most exciting for me is seeing some of the researchers from universities start to get involved. And this is where I think we'll really be able to start to scale and advance in our research capabilities, and to really start to understand what is happening here. Why is this? Why are what we're witnessing very effective therapeutic interventions? Why is that? How do we figure that out? And how do we how do we tease out those important variables that are the cause of the shift? And that takes a lot of data extraction. That takes a lot of work, but it's doable. And the more hands we have involved to do it, the better. Now, our big challenge is funding.
Yeah, that was my next
Most of these
question.
programs have been built from the ground up, and same with ISTO. And so we need to stabilize the funding mechanisms for most of our programs. And that's going to be a key focus of the next 1 to 2 years, is really getting the stability in place so that we can have a strong foundation that we build upon.
Where would you expect your funding to come from?
It's a variety. So we have a website. It's international. So INTL, surftherapy.org. And on there, we accept donations. It's a 501(c). So it's a nonprofit organization where you can have tax write-offs with it. And most of the contributing organizations can also accept donations. Many of them, including ISTO, also do grants and different grants that can be funding. Some of us have had donors that have helped start the organizations, and others. And one of the focus areas that I'll be focusing on longer term is building sustainable funding for individual programs. Are there business models? Is there corporate leadership coaching that we can use, take the same concepts, but apply it in a for-profit way to then fund the nonprofit therapeutic research? So we've got to tease those out. But right now it's a variety of funding mechanisms. But that's one of our challenge areas that we really need to stabilize in the coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's back this up a little bit and focus in on, you mentioned autism before, and the fact that autistic people sometimes have eye contact problems. How's that going to play out in surf therapy? Is that going to happen in the water, where they would specifically, maybe eventually, make eye contact a focus, or is that just going to play out naturally because they're going to require to have eye contact with their person that's teaching them, or is that going to happen in group sessions afterwards?
Yeah, it's a great question. So with autism in particular, it can be a challenge starting out surf therapy. And so it may take multiple sessions before we ever even get into the water. And that's okay. The key is to, as we mentioned earlier, really make the beach a safe space for an autistic child or individual. Over time, as it gets become a safe space, as they grow in relationship with their surf instructor or those in the program with them, socialization starts in very small pieces, whether that's eye contact or conversing. Different little aspects can start to come. And so I'm not an expert in autism, but the folks that are focused on it, they have very clear indicators of when success is starting to happen. And they track that through the evaluation. They interview parents because you can't always get the feedback directly from an autistic child.
Mm-hmm.
Their parents, their teachers, and adults that are around them to observe their behaviors. Do they have a growth in learning agility? What we think is happening is the mass amount of sensory, the sound, the movement of the water, the breaking of the waves, the sand moving, basically starts to create new neural pathways and can break through some disordered thinking or distorted way the brain may work. And so over time, neural pathways start to get built and can be built upon. And so somebody that may be nonverbal or very, very little verbal can start to grow some, potentially, not everybody, but some can start to grow some of those skill sets. And so that type of evolution you see over time. One of the more interesting things I learned from talking with some of the surf therapy practitioners with autism is many of the autistic focus groups will have past participants or older autistic persons that will be involved, because when there is a struggle with somebody or we can't get them into the water, mm-hmm. Oftentimes the autistic adult understands much better than the professionals what's going on for that child or individual, and can speak with them, can be with them. And so what's that's happening there is building relationships and building community. And many times autistic kids are excluded from relationships or other peer relationships with their age group. And so this starts to build some of the social aspects. And so those are just some really small examples of how little building blocks can start to fall in place. And over time, somebody can build some of those capabilities for themselves.
That's fascinating. Many of the afflictions that you're challenged with, dealing with, whether it's depression or PTSD or autism, there's obviously the brain is involved heavily and significantly in with that affliction. And you're saying that the surf therapy can activate aspects of the brain that's going to get it to grow. You said even establish new neural pathways to activate that brain to allow them to offset what's going wrong in the brain.
Exactly. And, or another example is, as we're beginning to learn with a pilot study, so very, very entry level at the moment, but very promising, is chronic pain. And so, pain originates from the brain.
Yeah.
And when there's a threat, in the case of surf therapy, if you're a beginner surfer, a 1 foot wave, your brain perceives as a threat, it stops sending signals to that you have pain in other areas, and it starts focusing on dealing with the threat in front of you. Now, if you then manage that threat in a way that brings dopamine, serotonin, right? You catch the wave, and over time, you keep building that. That's another example of when people then start to think about going surfing, potentially pain levels start to decrease while they're surfing, and in the water, pain decreases. And then the question is, can it stay decreased for a period of time outside of the water? Yeah. If all three of those things hold true, then it starts to walk you into saying this could be prescribable for chronic pain, because if you do it every 3 days, you anticipate, then you surf, and then you have a benefit for a day or two afterwards. And so that's how you start to think about this in terms of dosage over time, when you can figure out what's actually happening to cause that positive outcome.
Hey, let's take this opportunity right here to hear from our sponsors, okay? Brief message coming up.
Around P-Town, it's got the news that you can use. Around P-Town. AroundPtown.com, it's got the scoop with all the poop.
Ben's Barbershop, it's a place I like to stop. Whether it's to get a fancy do or just buzz off my mop, Ben's Barbershop. It's a place I like a lot, and you'd like it too if you did your do at Ben's Barbershop. That's Ben's Barbershop in Morrison, Illinois. Look 'em up on Facebook. Make an appointment. Tell 'em Jimmy I'm a doofus sent you.
I can imagine that session lengths vary as far as how long someone might be in surf therapy. I'm sure it can range from weeks to months, maybe longer.
Correct. Yeah. So there's different programs, and that's one of the things we're trying to figure out now is, does program length drive a big difference in terms of outcome? And I would argue it probably does, but we still need to prove that out. There are some shorter programs that are more day or weekend focused for very specific, like processing grief, a specific instance of grief. We think those can be effective, but we're still working through that to prove that out. And then many of them are much longer, where it's maybe 12 weeks or a series of sessions to build. And we find that oftentimes after somebody's concluded those sessions, the barrier to surfing, if you're near the ocean, can be rather low. You can buy a foam surfboard for Costco for $100, and then you're there. All you need to do is get to the beach. And so many times people can continue on their own and actually build a surf community for themselves. And by doing so, they've built community and connection.
Yeah, awesome.
Often the things that are missing in people's lives.
When you have a client come to you, I'm assuming there's some type of pre-assessment where you evaluate the client, what their needs are, and then do you set specific goals, and that sometimes determines the session length?
Yes, and every population group will be a bit different in how that goes about and how the intake process works. But generally speaking, just like you would in any other type of medical setting of why are you here and what are the goals of what you're trying to achieve will be included as part of that. And yes, that then helps define, is this the right surf therapy for you? Because many of these things are fairly unique. And so it may not be the right intervention for everybody. And so you want to make sure that it's the right thing for both the practice and the individual.
Tell me about some success stories that you're aware of, clients that have engaged in surf therapy and how they've grown from it.
Yeah. So when we had our world conference in Puerto Rico in December of 2023, we had a really special moment. And there's a program called Surf for Dem. Dr. Giovanni Martinez is the founder of that program, and he's also a board advisor for International Surf Therapy Organization. He's an incredible human being. He has focused, Surf for Dem focuses on autism population in Puerto Rico. And one of his longtime 100+ people there. And this was as a child who started around the ages of five or six, and the diagnostic said he'd be, nonverbal or very little verbal. Yeah, he was basically on the Asperger's spectrum, but had very little verbal capability at that time. Well, 13+ years later, he stood in front of our surf therapy organization, and he gave us about an hour speech talking about what surf therapy was for him, how it meant, how it impacted him, how it changed his family life. His mom was there with him, and he's about to go to college next year. He's he's looking at journalism, painting, or arts, and a few other potential majors. And he's an incredible artist. And this is an example of somebody that was written off, and through this surf therapy intervention, he's built capabilities, built self-confidence, he's built the ability to publicly speak, interact. He then sat down for another hour and a half, 2 hours around the picnic table and let us come up and ask questions. And for those that have ever dealt with autism, this is remarkable.
Indeed.
This doesn't just happen by miracle. This happened through dedicated hard work, research by Dr. Giovanni, and a dedicated team that has built this program up, and it's been life-changing. And so we got to witness what that outcome looked like 15 years in, and it was jaw-dropping.
I can't imagine. Somebody who is labeled autistic, labeled as someone who's going to be have all these barriers around them, all these things that they cannot do. Their life is going to be sheltered to a large degree, just shut down and tragically different from a normal person's life. And you guys opened up huge doors, and he walked right through them and was doing remarkable things. That's a great story.
And to me, it really articulates what surfing's all about. And surfing, has been an outsider sport and for many people, but there's an accepting community. We will take anybody that wants to get in the water. If you're willing to go in the water, you're welcome. And I think that that's not necessarily always how the surfing community is, but we've got to continue to push it that way. But generally speaking, most surfers will open their arms if you're willing to go out there and risk it. And for many of these population groups, other forms of medicine or therapy haven't been effective. And so it may be an alternative way of going about it. It may seem outside of the box, but I think it's effective. It's an effective recipe for many individuals. And I'm just excited that it's opening the opportunity for many to experience it.
Yeah. And that's your task, as you've already said before, to get that out there so that people are aware of, if traditional methods of dealing with your situation has not worked, well, then there are alternatives, and this is one that you're working hard to prove as a viable alternative. You're making a difference, Brian, in people's lives. You did that at Nestle. even before you started that Thrive Network, you were making a difference, and you certainly did so with the Thrive Network, and now you've taken on this enormous challenge. Wow, I'm very impressed. I'm so glad that there are people like you who are basically dedicating their lives to making a difference in other people's lives.
Well, it's I appreciate that, and I would say, I'm somebody who's been very lucky and fortunate in my life. I've had people like yourself, TR, Coach Don, many, Coach Popovich, that have dedicated, countless thousands of hours to helping grow me. And I was always inspired by that. I always felt blessed, quite frankly, to have had that structure in my life. And now when I look at the surf therapy, this is a new spot for me where I don't have the expertise. And what I do have, though, is hundreds of people around me that are unbelievably brilliant, have this passion to bring us forward. And my job is to really tap into that and unlock the barriers in their way and learn from them and advocate so that these great minds that are already out there, already putting the boots in the ground and building this, can get unleashed. And it's a bit of a shift where it's not me necessarily driving it. It's me learning, tapping into this great network of individuals and unleashing them.
Love it.
And that to me is exciting.
Yeah, I love it. You mentioned that you were lucky and fortunate, and I'm glad to have been a part of your journey, but it was more than just luck. As you yourself said, you overcame some difficulties with the ADHD, the dyslexia, and you worked hard at it. You were self-reflective. You were willing to experiment. You were willing to grow. You were willing to take risks, and here you are helping other people do the exact same thing. It's heartwarming.
It's been a wonderful journey, and when I look back, I wouldn't change really anything, even the struggles, because I think the struggles are what define you at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think when I look back at if I could sum up the coaching and leadership that I got from you guys, was attack challenges. Life is going to continue to come at you. You can't control that, but what you can control is how you respond to it. And that lesson has never left me. And if I can impart that lesson on anybody else, I consider it a life well lived, because I consider that the defining lesson of my life thus far, that and the importance of relationships with people.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. If I wanted to learn more about surf therapy, or if I wanted to even engage in self-therapy, what are my next steps?
So encourage people to go to our website. It's intlsurftherapy.org. And on there, there's a tab that you can see some of the programs. We don't have all the programs globally listed. But if you're struggling with something and are interested in researching, is there a program that can help you? That would be a good place to start. People are also welcome to reach out to me if they have any questions, they want to learn more, or they want to get involved. I can be reached at Schoo, SCHOO.Brian, BRIAN, @gmail.com. And we're always willing and gratefully accept donations. As I mentioned before, right, we will need financial support to be able to drive this mission forward. And that's a key focus area for me. So if you have the ability to donate and are willing to, we definitely welcome that and thank you. And if you do donate, please let me know so I can reach out to you, thank you, and keep you involved in the progress as we go forward.
Well, I certainly am going to keep in touch with you and watch with fascination the progress that your organization is going to make. It's got to be very exciting. It's challenging. It's like, because there's so many different directions that this can go. There's so you have so many irons in the fire, and I know that you've got a great team you're working with. It's like you're building something from the ground up and hoping to grow it into, and I think you will grow it into something that's going to continue to make a difference in many, many people's lives.
I hope so. And I should mention that we do have an annual conference every year. This in 2024 will be in late September. And in short time, you'll be able to find information on our website about this, but it'll be in Manhattan Beach, California. It's open to anybody. So you can attend this conference virtually or live, and we welcome anybody who's interested. What we have found is that every year there's more and more people, sometimes students, sometimes researchers, sometimes just people that found out about it and got interested. And so we welcome everybody. And when we look at what comprises of the different surf therapies around the world, the founders are incredibly diverse. Some have psychology backgrounds, some have athletic backgrounds, some have research backgrounds, some have none of the above, and are people like me that came from the business world and found a need and started their program. And so if you're sitting here listening to this and is interested in it, but are telling yourself, well, I don't have any background, I can't do it, I'd encourage you to think differently and reach out and come expose yourself to what surf therapy is. And if it's something that you think could help you or something that you may have a passion for, invite yourself to get involved, because there really isn't a barrier here unless you self-impose one.
That is one of the beauties of your program, that it's all inclusive. It's wonderful. Is there anything else, Brian, that you want to share with us before we conclude our conversation?
Last thing is just, hey, if anybody who's listening, especially from Wakanda, if you're ever out in Los Angeles, I'll be back out there by the end of the month, and we've got plenty of surfboards, and always enjoy teaching people and exposing people to surfing or the ocean. So we're about 15 minutes south of LAX. If you fly in, feel free to reach out, and happy to take you out in the water if you're ever interested. Nothing gives me more joy than seeing somebody experience surfing for the first time, and the look on their face when they catch a wave for the first time.
I wish I could. That would be awesome for me to experience that. I've never been on a surfboard. Do you take 60-year-old people with reconstructed knees?
We do. We take everybody, and we do adaptive surfing. There's many ways, and sometimes you just lay on the board and don't even need to stand up, but you still get that motion. You still get that feeling of you're harnessing nature in motion, and the energy of it. It's an incredible feeling when you catch a wave.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Brian, thanks so much for sharing an hour of your time telling us about surf therapy. It sounds exciting. It sounds like you're going to do wonderful things. We're very excited for that you are the chairman of that board, trying to corral all of the energy and all that expertise in making this a better place. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thanks for having me today. It's been great to talk with you, and thank you.
You betcha. We'll talk to you later. We'll check back in with you in a year or so and see where your organization is at.
I look forward to it.
All right. Take care, Brian.
Thank you.
I'm very proud of that young man. Proud to say he is a product of Wakanda High School, though much of his success is attributed to his willingness to work hard and think big, to take risks, to reinvent himself. Jimmy, what are some of your takeaways from this interview?
Well, first of all, I'd say Brian sets an example for all of us to do what you just mentioned and to follow your dreams and passions. He's still in his 30s and has pivoted hard to take on a new challenge to benefit the lives of other people. It's a great adventure. Secondly, learning about surf therapy suggests that we all should be open to alternative approaches to healing ourselves. If traditional methods such as talk therapy and medication aren't moving the needle to the wellness level you want, well, then look at other methods, whether it's music therapy, hiking therapy, or certainly surf therapy. Spot on, Jimmy. And while many of our listeners are not near an ocean, they could certainly consider taking a vacation to any of our coasts and spending some time in surf therapy. Contact the International Surf Therapy Organization for more information. And I'm thinking that maybe I could start up my own fishing therapy.
Really? What would you charge for that, Jimmy?
Oh, nothing, man. All you gotta do is bring me some live worms, and we'll get to work.
All right. Meanwhile, why don't you get us out of here?
Shut up! And kids, don't forget to be checking in with AroundPtown.com. It's got all the news that you can use. Stay hip, stay classy with AroundPtown.com. And for you fellas that want that hip and classy look, well, then you're going to want to get your butt to Ben's Barbershop chair. That's right, Ben's Barbershop. Look him up on Facebook.com. He's in Morrison. You make an appointment, you're going to love it. If you enjoyed listening to Boomer here, he'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to his podcast so you'd get notifications of when the next episode's coming up. Maybe leave a rating on a review. But yeah, go ahead and subscribe. That helps the podcast grow, and that makes the little fella feel so much better. And if you had any feedback for him, go ahead and contact him at ttaudioworks@gmail.com. Again, that's ttaudioworks@gmail.com. Okay, I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.